So, my presentation is about the article A Prison by Any Other Name, researched by Philip Zimbardo and some others, Haney, Banks, and Jaff. By the way, Zimbardo is the guy on the psych videos we sometimes watch with the goatee and the suit. You might recognize him. This experiment is famous, mainly because of the fact that it wouldn't be allowed today. But the experiment was conducted in the early 1970s, so moral laws weren't as strict. This experiment asked the question, does prison psychologically affect prisoners and/or guards? This question served as the purpose for the experiment, since they never really formed a hypothesis. Because it would be very difficult to track the psychological changes of real prisoners, they constructed an experiment. The plan was to create a simulated prison in the basement of the Stanford University Psychology Building, and to see what happens to the prisoners and the guards psychologically. You can probably see why that wouldn't be allowed today. To get participants, the experimenters placed an ad in a newspaper, offering a significant amount of money to volunteers. Out of almost 100 volunteers, 24 college-age men were chosen. By the flip of a coin, the participants were chosen to be either prisoners or guards. This would keep any personality predispositions from affecting the results. After this, the participants were sent home with no explanation or instructions. Several weeks later, those who were named prisoners were arrested from their homes under the accusation of armed robbery by the actual police and taken blindfolded to the mock prison. There, they were dressed as prisoners and placed behind bars. Meanwhile, the guards were dressed in uniforms, and they were given nightsticks and sunglasses to make them look more menacing. These guys worked 8-hour shifts, resuming their normal lives when not working, while the prisoners had to stay there full time. All the participants were then left to play their parts. The results turned out to be much more dramatic than expected. Guards were cruel to prisoners, using punishment and embarrassment unnecessarily to reinforce their power, while prisoners became dejected and obedient, many becoming depressed. Zimbardo himself admitted to thinking of himself as a prison superintendent rather than a psychologist conducting an experiment. The experiment, which was planned to last 2 weeks, got so out of control that it was cut off after only 6 days. There are several criticisms of this experiment, mostly for moral reasons. The experiment is considered unethical, and certain participants were allowed to get out of control. For example, one of the guards was particularly brutal to prisoners for no reason other than enforcement of his power. 2 of the prisoners had to be taken out of the experiment only a few days in because they became severely depressed and began rejecting food. Another criticism I didn't actually see anywhere but thought of myself was the fact that all of the participants were college-age men. Women or people of different ages could have different reactions to the experiment. After all, not all people in prisons are males in their 20s. This experiment, though it has many criticisms, is often used as an argument for the need of reform in prisons. Many prisons, though they are called correctional facilities, no longer focus on rehabilitation, but rather punishment. This experiment has also been used to explain occurrences such as the events at Abu Ghraib. So, to review. The big question was, does prison psychologically affect prisoners and/or guards? The method was an experiment, and the subjects were volunteers, all college-aged men. They were separated into 2 groups, either prisoners or guards. The guards quickly began abusing their power, using punishment and sadistic violence. The prisoners became obedient, many depressed, and overall became dehumanized. The participants and Zimbardo played their roles and temporarily lost themselves. The experiment was called off early because it got out of control. Recent applications include explanation for events at Abu Ghraib and an example for the need of reform in prisons.